Yep. That is true. Tonight we're starting on Numbers. We left off, we did Matthew, and between Leviticus, we did Leviticus and then Matthew, and now we're back to Numbers. Just a reminder a little bit, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Matthew, Mark, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, were inspired and written by Moses, the words given by God, okay? When Moses was up on the mountain 40 days, getting the 10 Commandments, that's what we understood he got. But evidently God laid on him then and later during the track, the year and a half, 2 years later, or 40 years actually. Evidently he told them the stories. There are some stories I know probably was passed down from generation to generation. I was listening to a video today. A guy was going through just 2 weeks ago. He's a tour guide in Israel. They're not doing tours yet, but he went on a tour with tour guides. There was updating tour guides, and they were going through Hebron. And Hebron is right on the edge of the Palestinian area. So part of the area they can go in and part not. They said they just got in there, but they wouldn't take people, tourists, because they had to go in there with an armored plated bus, just in case. They didn't want to get shot at, they didn't want all this stuff. So they were there and he was going through it. But Hebron is the place where Abraham, Isaac, Sarah, Rachel wasn't buried there. Leah was buried. That's where Abraham bought the cave to lay Sarah when she died. Well, the thing this guy said, that must be a tradition, said this was the original cave Adam and Eve was put in when they died. I'd never heard that before. So that's kind of interesting, and it hadn't been passed down through the Jewish Mishnah, I think that's what they call it, the Talmud, kind of the history behind all that. So anyway, we're going to jump into Numbers. Leviticus went through, and it was the first year, okay, from Exodus. They left Egypt, and the time frame was about a year till they got to Mount Sinai. This picks right up from there, and you'll see in this one, in one of the versions of the Bible, it says, "And the Lord spoke." Well, this one says, "Now the Lord spoke." The King James Version says "now," and that's just a connector. We got to remember, the Jewish first 5 books is most of the time all in one big scroll. Now, they may have 5 different scrolls that they roll out, but they said used to originally it was on one great big scroll. So all 5 books. And we only have the version, the names, because they didn't, in the Hebrew, they didn't have names of the books. This is what was given to Moses. And it's for us, it's all 5 books. We come up, when they changed it from Hebrew to Latin, and I can't remember the other one. They didn't have names on it in the Hebrew, so when they put names on it, they named this book Numbers. One of the reasons is because there's 2 census that are taken in this chapter. So that kind of, the book of Numbers. So that's the Septuagint and the Vulgate versions. Those 2 call it Numbers. The Hebrew Bible calls it In the Wilderness. That's the name of this book, because that's what they did. They were in the wilderness for this. So Leviticus took about a year. Okay? Numbers covers almost 39 years. from the start of Numbers to the end of Numbers, they're getting ready to go in. At the end of the Numbers, when we finish it, they'll be getting ready to go in. Moses dies, and Joshua takes over, and they go into the Promised Land. Okay? Just gives you a little overview of what it is. It says, now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tabernacle of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after they'd come out of the land of Egypt, saying, now, it took them a year to get here. The very last part of Leviticus, God told them how to build the tabernacle. That last month, it took them about a month for the Levites. They've got all the materials together and everything. It took them a time period. It's about a month to get the materials, put it together, sew it, put it all up. They put the tabernacle up. So they've been here now 2 or 3 months at this place. So they've been a year. You're starting the second year, and it's the first month in that second year that they're starting here, okay? All previously...
What was their first month?
Well,
ours is January.
I don't know the names of them. I think it's Aviv. That's what they call it. But their first month is not in January of our time. It's in the middle of the year. Yeah, they just had their New Year's here back not very long ago, Rosh Hashanah. So it doesn't correspond with what ours is. But it says in the second year after they had came out of the land of Egypt. So it's just a timing. This is about, I think they showed down here somewhere, 1443 is what I remember, BC. And then they lasted almost 13 or 1409 or something like that was when they started into Joshua started going over into Canaan. They started their working the area, fighting the Canaanites. So they came through the Red Sea. God provided through the desert wilderness, and Israel came to Sinai, and they went Mount Sinai. Moses went up to meet with God, received the law, and the people of Israel also honored an idolatrous image of the golden calf. Okay, that's where God corrected them. They camped at Sinai. Israel built the tabernacle, or the tent of meeting, and they established the priesthood, the Levites. At the end of the Leviticus, they'd been out of Egypt for about a year. So the main part of the book of Exodus covers 1 year. Leviticus, only a month. So the book of, I was wrong. The Exodus covers about a year. Leviticus only covers about a month. And then it goes on and says, but Numbers covers the rest of the time, the 38 plus years that they wandered in the wilderness. It says, every year was necessary for the teaching of a lesson. How many days did they send the spies out? We haven't got there yet. How many days did they go over to Canaan? Moses sent them out here. They're going to do that in chapter 13, 14, something like that. You remember how many days that they were over in Canaan? How many days and nights was the flood on the earth? Give you a hint.
365.
How many days did it rain?
40 days.
40 days and 40 nights. They were there 40 days, and the spies came back after 40 days. So, you get a year for every day that they did. So they had to wait out 40 years. And you got to remember, from this time frame to the end of the time frame, all the people that's here dies, except Joshua and Caleb. Even Moses dies. So we're going to take a census here at the end of this chapter. And at the end of the book of Numbers, they're going to take another census.
Beginning and the end of living at that time.
Yeah. And that census is almost the same amount. We'll talk about it here in a little bit. But in between time, everybody died from the first census, and they have about the same amount of people. That's kind of interesting.
That includes the children too.
Yes. Yeah. says the book of Numbers approaches it all God's way. In the wilderness, one may be tempted to launch 100 different schemes and plans to move forward, but only God's way really works. And the book of Numbers tells us about God's way. The idea is that the Lord spoke to Moses is repeated more than 150 times and more than 20 different ways in Numbers. You talk about repetition. We talked about that, how he gave them the law, then he told them about the law later in Exodus and Deuteronomy. He's going to tell them again. Here, he's trying to hammer it home. You got to understand, these people was for several years, several hundred years, they were in Egypt. And all remembrance of Canaan, where they lived, where Abraham lived, before that, Abraham and Isaac, they've been wiped from their memory. They don't have any clue from that.
Wow.
It says the area where they're in, why they call it the wilderness, it's not a completely dry, arid area, but it has little vegetation and very few trees. The rainfall is so light that it's only a few inches per year, so it doesn't support any kind of cultivation at all. That's why a lot of the people there are nomads, and they go around, take their herds around where they can kind of feed them at that particular time. The theme of the book of Numbers is the journey to the promised land of Canaan. The first 10 chapters covers 50 days, almost 2 months, and describes how Moses organized Israel for the march from Sinai to the promised land. And you got to understand, it takes them, they march back and forth, but 40 years to get there, almost 38 years to get there. But they said it's an 11-day journey to get there from Mount Sinai to just on the east side of Jordan where Jericho's at, where they started.
I wonder how many miles that was.
Well, I don't know.
But they wandered back and forth, didn't they?
They wandered around, a few times, different places.
They just go straight.
Well, they'd go someplace, and then they went up there to go over to the Jordan, and they sent spies out and waited the 40 days. And since they rejected God, then he took them back down, to a different place and went around again.
Yeah, you don't reject God without punishment.
That's right. The phrase, the desert of Sinai, locates the census taking the rugged regions of the Sinai Peninsula. It's what we'd call Saudi Arabia today. Okay? The precise location is near Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb. The mountain of God has been debated since at least since the early 4th century. So we're not really sure exactly because there's nothing to point it to. We decorated graves last week, and I could always go to my uncle's graves there in Broken Arrow because the tree was there. Well, the tree's gone now. So you got to remember it's in this section and halfway down and all this. It's a little bit
drive and walk.
Time changes things. In 40 years, I can guarantee it changes a lot. Different things. Trees die and things got, new trees spring up and rivers change and all that stuff. So the book of Numbers gives us the big vision. Where is God taking us? What will it take to get there? What are the qualities that God must develop in us and demand in us along the way? Israel had to be transformed from a people that was dominated. You got to understand they were slaves. And they had to start relying upon God. Instead of relying upon their slave masters to give them everything, and they didn't give it to them, but they worked for it. But they had to fend for themselves, and they wasn't used to that. Okay? 2 and 3, Brother Everson, you want to read that?
Just take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel by their families, by their father's house, according to the number of names, every male individually, from 20 years old and above, all who are able to go to war in Israel. You and Aaron shall number them by their armies.
Okay. This is from God. This is not something that Moses thought of. but it was from God that God told Moses to go and count the people. But he said there was a counting before. I don't know if you remember back in Leviticus was talking about, but they numbered the people for taxation when they were starting to build the tabernacle. Okay, so this is another census that they did, but this time, and we're not there yet, but we'll get there in the next verse. But they number only the men. We're on page 3, and they leave out. We'll see here in a few minutes the Levites, only the men of war, the ones that are going to go to war above age 20. So this is where they get the numbers that they were thinking. It was about 2 to 2.5 million people that they had there. And since we're only a year from Egypt, that's about how many people came from Egypt. Some people died, I'm sure, along the way. Some people had babies along the way. But it's about 2. You know how many 2 million people, a camp of 2 million people is? You know, you see these Rocklahoma and all that with all the people out there, and they've got 640 acres are spread out. There's not that many people there. You know, maybe 100,000. You're talking about 20 times that. This took probably several square miles, yeah, to have these people there. So that also gives them opinion. As we talked before, they had to have water, they had to have food for themselves and their animals, and all these things. And you just take up and move. You don't do that every day because you got a lot of people. When the first part moves, the second part may be 2 or 3 days behind because it's going so far. And if we remember back in Exodus, Jethro is the one that already told Moses that he needs to organize the people in thousands, hundreds, and fifties. Yeah, get a system going. Well, here he breaks it down a little bit different as far as he wants it in the families. Okay? So a month before this, back in Exodus, says they were numbered for taxation. That's what we were talking about earlier. God wanted to make the count made by their families because the strength of Israel was determined by the strength of the individual families. And we're talking, when they talk like that, they're talking about the 12, original 12, basically. Judah, Dan, Asher, Naphtali. That's the families that they're talking about. So Aaron and him would number the armies. They would take the census. They would take the numbers down. But they don't have to go by and count everybody. It says the story of on page 5, the top of page 5, the story of the conquest of Canaan is that the spoliation or feeble peoples by a stronger in order to possess a territory. It is that purification of a land in order that there might be planted in it a people whose history, blessings, would come to all nations. It said Israel had a literal, physical, fought in the material world war to fight. And they had to go through all these things to do it. You want to read for us, Iris? 4 through 16? It's a long passage.
I don't think I can.
Okay, that's all right.
Ruby, you want to read?
You want to read, Ruby?
On page 5.
Yeah, that middle section there, 4 through 16.
Yeah, middle of the page.
Yeah, the inventory.
Lord, taken census of number 1, 4 to 16, the head of the tribe, and with you there shall be a man for every tribe, each one head of his father's house. These are the names of the men who shall stand with you from Reuben.
You can skip over some of the names if you want. That's what I said. It's long, but it's not long.
Reuben, and Judah.
Mhm.
Oh my.
From Isker.
That's
See, it tells the name, like from Reuben, we're going to take Eleazar, the son of Shedar. From Simeon, we're going to take Shemithiel, the son of Zerosity. From Judah, we're going to take Nashon, the son of Abinadab. From Isker, we're going to take Nathaniel, or Nethanel, the son of Zuar. From Zebulun, we're going to take Elam, the son of Helon. From the sons of Joseph, from Ephraim, okay, and this is where they split. They don't take Levi's, but they take Joseph, and they use both sons for Joseph. They don't use Joseph himself, but they use Manasseh and Ephraim. So that makes a total of 12 tribes. Here, what they're talking about. So they take Elishama, the son of Ammihud from Manasseh, Gamiel, the son of Pedazur, from Benjamin, Abidan, the son of Gideoni, from Dan, Ahiezer, the son of Amishadai, from Asher, Pagel, the son of Okran, and from Gad, Eliasaph, the son of Duel. From Naphtali, Ahira, the son of Enan. These were the chosen from the congregation, leaders of their fathers' tribes, heads of the divisions of Israel.
Thank you
So,
for pronouncing all that.
oh, I don't know if I did them right or not, but
That was something.
yeah, I try. But
Good job.
so each one, 12 different tribes, they had a person that was in charge. And it was one that was probably the tribe voted on or somehow took lots on or something in order to get there for him. So each one of these, as we'll see in a minute, is responsible for counting their own tribe and reporting back to Moses and Aaron. And then from there, from that person, they're grouped into hundreds and thousands and hundreds and groups of 50. So their families are broken down further. So they go around and get those numbers. So each one has a tribe that they're going to bring back the number to, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. Now this was as we said, because it was 20 years old and up, this is a military census, one that they're taking to see how many fighting men do we have. Now you understand these are big, rough guys because they were slave laborers. They labored out there in the fields doing all making the bricks and cutting the wheat, doing everything they did for the Egyptians, but they were not used to fighting. So they had to be trained and they had to go through that. This next few years we'll figure that out. Should have done it earlier, but they could have if they relied on God, because they didn't have to do much fighting when they relied on God. One notice is Nashon, the one that was taken from Judah, the tribe of Judah, the leader Nashon. He's actually mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus. Okay, so that's somebody that kind of keep an eye on.
It said from the tribe of Judah, Nashai, whose name can mean, my people are noble.
Mm-hmm. Each name, we'll go down here, and I'm not going to read them all, but down at page 6 and the top of page 7, each name of the person is given there. It tells what it is, and each one of them has my God in it. You can see the first one, Elzir, his name, my God is a rock. Shemuel, his name means my peace is God. The only one that isn't, I'd hate to have his name, Ahira, my brother is evil. That's not a good name, but every one of them, other than that, has that. So I don't know why they named Naphtali.
I wouldn't even want people to know that.
Well, my brother's evil. It must have meant something to them. But names were very important to them back then. They're important today too, but we don't take it that way. Your name means a lot.
Well, each one of us
Parents
has
who use wisdom in naming their children.
That's right. Today it's amazing. And we just looked at those. We're used to Bill and Joe, and Harry, and all these names. And you look at these names, it's like, man, and that's the way it is over in Israel. When we went there, they would start. You'd see these names of the people, and it's like, man, I never knew there were people named that. These things, but they are. It's just different because it's actually a word. It means something.
Yeah, so the easiest one is Benjamin.
Yeah, we know Benjamin. Dan's probably easier. Benjamin. So this is the assembly of the leaders. 17 through 19, you want to read that for us, Bertha?
Moses and Aaron took these men who had been mentioned by name, and they assembled all the congregation together on the first day of the second month, and they recited their ancestry by families, by their fathers' houses, according to the number of names, from 20 years old and above, each one individually. As the Lord commanded Moses, so he numbered them in the wilderness of Sinai.
Okay. So it took it. At the very first part, it was the first month of the second year. Now we're in the second month. So he gave them a month to get this census taken care. Here again, you're covering several square miles. You got 12 divided. Say it was 12 square miles. It's probably more than that. Each one of the guys had to go down each tent row and all these things to get all that figured out. Yeah, it is. So they went through, and it helps them. And this is something they did anyway. They recited their history, their genealogy, because it meant something to them. They were of that tribe of Judah, or tribe of Benjamin, or tribe of Dan, and they were proud of it. And they wanted to keep that going. It tells us down there in the middle of the page, under the new covenant, there is a distribution of grace to everyone, an endowment of each, according to his faith, with priestly and even kingly powers. The commission each receives is not to be a freelance in the divine warfare, but to take his right place in the ranks, and that place he must find. So that's when we become a Christian, we're enrolling in God's army. And we're if you even haven't been in an army, if you've been in a job, almost everybody, unless you're the owner of the company, you report to somebody. So you're not able to do what you want to do most of the time. You've got to do what the boss tells you to do. That's the same thing under the new covenant. As Moses told them, Moses was talking to God, and Moses then distributed out to his people what God told them. And then they went out and did the business. Now we get to kind of the boring part. It's not boring, but it is interesting. It's numbers. I'll just read it because it's so many. It says, the children of Reuben, Israel's oldest son, and it goes down by how they were born. Okay? And it goes through Rachel first, I think it is. No, it wouldn't be. That would be Leah first, I think. Anyway, Reuben is the oldest son, and their genealogies by family, by their father's house, according to the number of names, every male individually from 20 years old and above, all who were able to go to war. Those who were numbered of the tribe of Reuben were 46,500. One tribe. That's the size, bigger than Owasso, I think. They said Owasso is about 35,000, 40,000. So you can see how much that covered. It says this, and a lot of people have trouble with these numbers. They seem like they're so large, but it could easily be that much. They go through it, and it says, if you go down the middle of page 9, it says, two commentators, Cole and Allen, mention several different ways these can be understood. First of all, they can be literal and accurate, which is the way we take it. Some people say they're literal and accurate, but taken from David and Solomon's time, and then read back into history. Maybe, we don't know. The numbers have been interpreted as a form of gematria. Now, what that is a calculation of numbers using letters. I never thought of that before, but it could be. Say, where they get the number of the beast was a 666, they said that's the letters of the name. Well, in Hebrew, how many letters do we have in our alphabet?
26.
What's the fourth letter? A, B, C, D. We don't have to do that. Right.
D.
I know, A, B, C, D, but same thing in Hebrews. Each letter has a number associated with it. Okay? So you put together a word, you can add those numbers up, and whatever that number is, and you say that word, that's the number of that word. So, I'm not saying that that's the way it is, but they do, you get a lot of mysticism in the Jewish line through this gematria. That's where they get a lot of hidden meanings, they say. But it's interesting because some of the things are, it can't be coincidence. I know I was listening to one of the shows on television, the rabbi show, Jason Sobel, and he was telling the number of, I think it was Moses, and it went back and it was also a different number of something else later in the book and something else later in the Bible. It's amazing how each one of these numbers, and you can say, how can that be? Well, you add up the numbers of the letters, and just like our numbers, you know, DID, it'd be 4 plus 1 plus 4, that's 9. Well, you can get a whole bunch of other words that come out to the word 9 also. So when you go through that and look at that, to us it's more coincidence because our letters aren't built that way, but theirs are. They mean both letters and numbers at the same time.
So each of ours separate.
Well, we do, but they can do the same, and words mean the same thing. I mean, they have a number associated with them. Anyway, that's beside it. The census figures also are misunderstood because of the word thousands. And that's possible. It could be that that's a conversion that they didn't make right. We don't know. But it could have had a different meaning. And then you get into the esoterics. It says the census are just symbolic. They're purposeful exaggerations. They somehow got corrupted when the text was written down. So, but it says the last idea is not supported by any existing manuscript. Every one of them has the same numbers. So we got to go back and says with all this in mind, you kind of go back to the very first one. They're literal and they're accurate.
Well, don't you think that some of them might have been, well, assumed?
I don't think so. I think they gave them a month to go through there, and I think they got. Now, as you go through here, we're not going to read each one of them because they're just repetitive, okay? Of the words, only thing that changes is the number. So where the first one was 46,500, and each one of these are rounded, it appears, except Gad. The tribe of Gad has 45,650. Everywhere else, others, they're not rounded. Okay? So the first tribe we read, Simeon had 59,300. Gad had 45,650. Judah, 74,600. Issachar had 54,400. Zebulun, 57,400. Ephraim had 40,500. Manasseh had 32,200. Benjamin, 35,400. Dan had 62,700. Asher had 41,500. Naphtali had 53,400. So as you go through each one of these, the numbers to us doesn't mean a lot, but look at them and compare them. Who's the smallest? Actually, it looks like Manasseh is the smallest, 32,200. Benjamin's 35,400.
Well, you know, they're not gonna all be we can't all be the same.
No, but I'm just saying, look, Judah is almost twice, it's more than twice than Manasseh is.
Yeah.
Now, you got to remember too, Judah, Manasseh is from, and some of these you can go through and read. I read some commentary on all these. It's interesting how it said Manasseh was the firstborn of Joseph, but Ephraim was the secondborn, and it said Ephraim would outgrow or would grow in prominence. Ephraim's actually more than Manasseh is in this time. Those two together is Joseph, okay, his house, but they're still not as much as Judah.
It's just fascinating how they took numbers.
They kept track of it. They wanted to keep track of everything to know.
Yeah, also, Benjamin, Manasseh, and Ephraim, they're all younger than the rest of these.
They are, yeah, because they
are grandsons.
12 kids.
Yeah,
You're going to have at least 12 years in between. There wasn't any twins that I know of these. So.
No, like you said, you're talking a whole tribe.
Yeah.
In 12 years, a whole tribe can make a little more than one.
That's right. Can go further. Look at the kids today. Some kids right out of high school have kids. I mean, Darla's cousin, she's a great grandmother, younger than Darla is, and she's a great grandmother. And we're just, we've just got two.
When I was down in Florida, we had this young lady. She was 14 and he was 15, and they married. Her parents got them married, and they stayed married for a long time, but they had to go to school in the school bus.
Yeah.
And they were going to be, she was with child.
Yeah.
My sister was a very young mother and a very young grandmother.
So the total, verses 44 through 46, these are the ones who were numbered, who Moses and Aaron numbered, with the leaders of Israel, 12 men, each one representing his father's house. So all who were numbered of the children of Israel by their father's houses, from 20 years old and above, all who were able to go to war in Israel, all who were numbered was 603,550. That's a lot of guys, 603,550. Now, just think of that. In 38 years, they're going to repeat this census. None of those people are going to be alive, except
They waited that.
Joshua and
How many
Caleb.
years in between?
38 years.
Why?
Because they disobeyed God.
Oh.
And God made them walk around in the wilderness and died until the next generation came up.
Yeah, but if you figure that, the oldest one besides Joshua and Caleb was 59 years old.
Yeah.
Hey, Jesus wanted to, God wanted to breathe.
Well, they wanted somebody that would take orders, and they wasn't taking orders.
God made a new breed.
Some of the things it says here, the first census, Manasseh was the smallest tribe, and Judah was the largest. There were two tribes in the 30,000s, 3 in the 40,000s, 4 in 50,000s, 1 in 60,000, and 1 in 70,000. So between that, based on that and the age they are, they think maybe 70% of the men was counted. So you round that up, and then put wives with them to the courting, and the kids are counted in there too. They think anywhere from 2 to 2.5 million was what was there, the population of that crowd that was following it. And it's an astonishing increase from 75 souls or 70 souls that went down to Egypt in Genesis. Now we say their father's house, but it's actually their ancestors, because there's 200 years. They went down to Joseph went down hundreds of years before and his brothers came along later. Now, 200 plus years later, there are 2 million.
This, on 47, says that the Levites were not numbered among them by their father's tribe.
Mhm.
And the Lord had spoken to Moses, saying, only the tribe of Levi you shall not number.
Right.
But why?
Keep going. Let's read it.
I'll go ahead and read it.
Yeah, read the rest of it.
Not taking censors of them among the children of Israel. Oh, children, okay. But you shall appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of the testimony, over all its furnishings and all over things that belong to it. They shall carry the tabernacle and all its furnishing. They shall attend to it and camp around the tabernacle. And when the tabernacle is to go forward, the Levites shall take it down. And when the tabernacle is to be set up, the Levites will set it up. The outsider who comes near shall be put to death. The children of Israel shall pitch their tents everywhere by his own camp, everyone by his own standard, according to their armies. But the Levites shall camp around the tabernacle of the testimony, that there may be no wrath on the congregation of the children of Israel, and the Levites shall keep charge of the tabernacle of the testimony.
They were set aside. Okay, Moses and Aaron was of the Levite tribe. God had already told them and separated them out. Remember, Aaron was made the high priest, not Moses, but Aaron. But Aaron was the oldest, and that's one reason why he became the high priest and not Moses. But that family, the family of Levi, became the ones that were going to take care of the tabernacle. So, since they are there, and God had given them, remember back in Leviticus, there was a whole bunch of rules about the tabernacle. How you got to wash your feet, how many, if you're so rich, you can do a bull for an offering, for a sin offering, another one for a burnt offering. And remember all that stuff. They didn't want those people to go out and get killed.
I see. Okay.
It's not, they were set aside for another, not for warfare.
Okay.
So you got one tribe out of 12, and actually they still have 12 tribes, but that tribe, Ephraim, took their place. We don't know how many was there. Okay, in the taxation, I don't think they counted them either. I'd have to go back and look. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember off the top of my head because they were giving the taxation. Well, that's right. It's like taxing yourself. It's like the king of England. He don't pay taxes because, he gets the taxes. He's the one that gets it. So this was for the tabernacle, for building it, for upkeep, for keeping it going. Things tore, things got messed up. We think of the tabernacle was built and all this. Well, it went 40 years, but I'm sure they replaced a few things, in it because of when they moved, and I'm sure they didn't ever lose one piece of it, you think, when they were tearing it down. I'm sure they did. So they had to have extra things. So this is why they left the tribe of Levi.
Because God appointed them as a special service.
That's right. And they were if you want to call it, the religious police, if you want to at the time. Their tribe was around the tabernacle. Okay? So, and I don't know how many there were. It does say a little later on. I can't remember how many. But it's several wide. So anybody that tries to get to it, they're going to stop them.
That's what I thought too.
Okay? Now, and they're always in the center of the camps. From there, it's built out. You have tribes going to the north.
Check the tabernacle.
They are. They have tribes going to the north, tribes going to the south, tribes going to the east, tribes going to the west. We'll see later on. I think it's here in Numbers that it tells us where they are actually situated. If not, it may be back in Leviticus. I'd have to go remember.
Well, at least I asked questions.
Yeah.
And
So
I can remember part of Leviticus, and then we get into Numbers. There has to be a reason. Correlating.
So if we go back to the New Testament, is there anything similar to this in the New Testament?
Covenant.
Dealing with the tabernacle,
Oh,
surrounding the tabernacle.
the priest.
Revelation 4:4, as the living creatures are between the 4 and 20 elders, they're all around the throne. They're protecting the throne, just like the Levites were.
Wasn't it true that only the priest was allowed to go into
Yeah.
the tabernacle?
And only the high priest into the Holy of Holies once a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Levite, well, you have the Levites and then you have the priests. Priests are a special part of the Levites. They had to learn special things. Remember, that's what we learned in the Leviticus. There were special ones. Now, the Levites, they're the ones that tore down the temple. I mean, all of them. They tore down the tabernacle, put it together, carried it. They're the ones that carried the different things. But the priests, there was only a certain tribe of Levi. And that was Aaron's tribe, his family. Say that. And we'll see that later on when Aaron dies. Eleazar, his
So
son.
the Levites never ever got counted in the census.
No, I don't say that.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't on this military census.
Oh, okay.
This is a military census.
But they probably did later on.
Yeah.
Later on in regular census.
We'll see.
I'm a little ahead of us.
So it was counting or taking inventory is a step in organization, moving forward, and it's in preparing to enter the promised land. Israel had to be organized. God is an organized God and moves through organization, even when that organization is not easily seen. Therefore, it was essential that Israel take inventory and count how many men were ready to fight. You know, it's easy if you have a whole bunch of guys and they're all gung-ho and they all run up the hill, you know, they'll probably all get shot. Because the smart guys are standing behind the rocks and the trees and shooting at them as they're trying to. You got to have some kind of theory or some kind of thought behind it. That's why God told them several times, you don't have to do all this. What did he tell them in Jericho? You don't even have to fight. Walk around that city 7 times. You know, once each day, and then the 7th day go around 7 times. They didn't even fight. The walls just fell down. Other times they were, I think it's the Amalekites, they were out there and they saw the water. He dug a whole bunch of trenches. God told them to bring a whole bunch of trenches. They filled them with water. The enemy saw them and the reflection on it scared them to death and they took off, killed one another. God would help them if they would just listen. But that's their problem. This, in the wilderness, is the problem that Israel has. And it's part of it today. They didn't listen 2,000 years ago. Get hate mail, but that's what it is. They didn't listen 2,000 years ago. And when he comes back, they'll listen. Then they'll understand. So, all right, I appreciate everybody coming out.
Well, we appreciate you.
It'll be another